What's the most disgusting thing you saw someone doing who didn't know you were watching them? My ex-boss used to eat on video calls and then floss her teeth with her hair that was still attached to her head in full sight of all of us, and then would tuck said hair as behind her ear and continue with the meeting. This sounds like an amazingly badass barbarian in an RPG. Did she also have a bone through her nose? I assume she could crush boulders with her thighs. Story 2. Mid-90s, I was shadowing a salesman, and we were about to give a big presentation that had the potential to result in a huge contract for our company. While we were in the elevator on the ride up, he farted and immediately realized he had crapped himself. He hit the emergency stop on the elevator, stripped, took off his underwear, and wiped with his undershirt, all the while laughing so hard he couldn't control himself and continued crap on his slacks. He wiped the slacks off, put the undies and the t-shirt in the trash can, and acted like nothing had happened. When he reached over and started the elevator again, I pressed the button for the very next floor, walked to another elevator, and left the building. Of course, I was fired for leaving. Unfortunately for Dude, the elevator had an old-school closed-circuit camera, and the whole thing was caught on video. The buddy who had gotten me the job told me that the next day, the boss played the video for everyone. Come on, what the ever-living hell did I just read? Good God! Why did they commit to firing you once they saw what happened? Did they expect a different reaction to a literal crap show? Story 3. This carnival, I saw a girl standing, pissing herself and kissing a guy at the same time. Piss going down her legs and everything on a Sunday afternoon party. Story 4. At a work event, I saw a woman stick her hands down the back of her pants and scratch, then smelled her hand. I no longer eat any of the homemade desserts she brings in. Comment. My husband was in the hospital for several weeks recently. The nurses were great and we wanted to show our appreciation. I thought about making homemade cookies, but that exact thought was in my mind. I took them 5 boxes of Girl Scout cookies instead. They seemed to appreciate it. I can't imagine the things you've seen. I feel so much guilt about how much I loathe potlucks, but I just can't do it. The last time I ate saugrooksing someone made and brought to work, I pulled a cat hair out of my mouth. I worked in a grocery store, and there was a regular who was in every single morning at 7 a.m. to get breakfast from our deli. He would stick his hand down the back of his pants and move around in there for a bit, eat some breakfast, move to the lottery machine, hands back down the back of his pants, poke around on the touchscreen and buy some tickets, eat more breakfast, grab a drink, hands down pants, pay for the drink at the self-scan units. He either didn't know that the few employees that were there for opening saw him, or he didn't care. It ended up that we took turns following him and sanitizing every single thing he touched. He did this throughout the pandemic, even. Story 5. My mom never closed the door in the bathroom after a while. I once walked by and saw her in a towel cleaning the hair out of her razor with my ducking toothbrush. I said, "What the duck?" I got my first paycheck for my first job that day, and I immediately went to a store and got a new one. I get home and my old one was sitting in a cup of rubbing alcohol, as if that makes it better. Story 6. Shoot a woodpecker with a .308 hunting rifle on a deer hunting trip. I was walking back towards camp at dusk and stopped when I caught sight of him aiming, thinking he'd sighted a buck. Followed the line of sight just before seeing the woodpecker evaporate into a cloud of feathers. Dude was a duckin' redneck git that a friend of mine invited, would shoot spotted fawns and say crap like, "If it's brown, it's down." I had long hair and hunted strictly for sustenance. Hate killing, but like knowing where my food comes from. He legitimately couldn't understand why it was a problem shooting a woodpecker just to kill saugrooksing. We had words. It got pretty tense. He offered to go to yard, Florida idiot for fist fight, and quickly backed down when I started putting my gear down to beat his head in. I hate fighting, but goddamn man, never could understand people that kill just because. Story 7. A guy I used to work with ran the gamut, body odor, pick his nose and ate it, etc. One day in the lunchroom, he clipped his toenails into a pile, then swept them into his hand and tossed them into his mouth. I just gagged a bit, thinking of the crunching sound it made. Story 8. Last Easter. Boyfriend's 80-year-old father standing at the dessert table at his house after we'd gone over there for a holiday dinner. From across the room, I watched him pick up the cake knife, a big butter knife type that had been used to cut a big dessert cake, and he just pretty much deep-throated the knife to suck all of the cake frosting off. I must have been the only one watching him doing this. With my jaw open, he was very nonchalant and casual about it, not looking sneaky or rushed at all, but as if it were the most natural thing in the world to do. He then, very casually, just put the cake knife back down on the table next to the cake for the next person to use, and walked away. I jumped up, grabbed the cake knife, went behind his back to the kitchen sink, and threw it into the sink. It's not my place to start a family altercation about this in his house, but duck him? That was absolutely disgusting. I am now completely put off by food in their house, especially their homemade desserts. It's not dementia or anything like that. He 100% has all his marbles. I watched an old man slowly and without care drink all of the vegetable soup at the salad bar in Lowe's Foods. He was drinking it with the soup ladle too. When he was done, he simply put the ladle into the tomato soup that wasn't empty, and he walked away. Story 9. A man tried to film a presidential campaign ad on the graves of fallen soldiers. Then his team assaulted the graveyard staff and told the media they were suffering from mental problems. Story 10. I was shopping in a relatively expensive boutique. I used to go there about 5 times a year for clothes for various social events. Basically, they knew me there, and I knew everyone. Anyways, I was in the dressing room and heard what sounded like a loud, wet fart from outside the room. There wasn't a door on the changing room, but a long velvet curtain, very heavy. I poked a finger between the curtain and the wall. BC, I was partly clothed, not interested in exposing myself, and saw the shop manager, not the person assisting me who was getting a dress for me to try. Pants down, bent over, looking at his in the floor-length mirror. A whole shaved in all its gloriousness. He sniffed his finger, gave another once-over inspection, then pulled up his pants and shuffled off. I got dressed and told the assistant what I had witnessed. She didn't even pretend to act shocked. She just sighed and apologized. I never went back. Story 11. I watched a coworker walk to a corner of our building. I could see her through gaps in the shelves, reached into her ass crack, and very obviously scratch her git rather aggressively, then pulled her hand out and smelled it, then went about her day like nothing. No hand washing. No trip to the bathroom to handle whatever the issue was. Just continue on with your day, love. Story 12. Saw my mom blow her nose into my bath towel. Later on, she swore up and down that she didn't do it and I was making it up and being ridiculous. My older brother was cheating on his ex-girlfriend with some other woman who lived not too far from me. I lived in a different town to my brother, so he was in town and came over that night with some other woman I had never met then, just greeted and left shortly after. Was going to be spending the night at this other woman's place. Anyway, a month later, we're visiting home and we're chatting about disgusting things we've seen people do. And he tells me that he was bathing with the woman he brought with him to my place the morning after they were at my place. And everything was fine until she blew her nose into the bathing water they both had just gotten into and sitting in mid-conversation. Found that story hilarious because that wouldn't have happened to him had he not been out cheating. Story 13. Knew a dude in high school who would sit in class and spend ages scratching all of his dandruff off onto his desk, then pat it neatly into a pile, check around to see that nobody was looking, and chow down on the pile, one pinchful at a time. He also regularly used his nose as a mid-face snack dispenser. Update. Just for interest's sake, the same guy reached out to me years later out of absolutely nowhere asking me on a date. His qualifiers were that he's very tall now and earns lots of money. I politely declined XD. Story 14. My brother last night, he pooped, and I went in after him to relieve my own turtle heads. I noticed he forgot to flush. Better yet, there was no toilet paper in the bowl. Conflicted, I asked him, why is there no toilet paper in the bowl? We don't have a bidet. My brother, well, there was no toilet paper to begin with. Me, did you get in the shower to wash off? My brother, no. Me, is there poop on your... My brother, yes. This man decides to pull his pants up after dropping a load. Didn't wipe, didn't wash, pulled his pants up and let the fecal matter remain. Then gets on his bed to play Roblox. He just started middle school too. Comment. Dude, tell your parents to buy a bidet. They're like $25 on the cheap end. I will help you install it over a video call if you need. And it would literally be the first video call I've ever made with a stranger. That's how much I hate this. I'm not kidding at all. Story 15. Also, I saw a guy jacking off on a city bus right near 3 kids. The dad of the kids went over and literally dragged the guy to the door and threw him out the exit while the bus was moving. He totally deserved it though. Story 16. I was at a bar with a group of friends. Probably the biggest party friends I've had, and I don't remember how it came up. But there was this super drunk lady, probably in her 50s. Not what most would consider attractive, talking about flashing people. She said she didn't have big enough boobs to flash, but my friend did, and then was trying to get her to, which she didn't. Then this older lady exclaimed, I have a though, and then proceeded to pull down her pants, and that was disgusting, but obviously she knew people were watching. However, it then somehow came up that she can fit a beer bottle up her butt that lead to her and a couple of my friends going to the bathroom to watch this take place. I didn't know this was going on until they came out and didn't believe it until someone said the bottle was still in there. So me and one other friend go in there to look. And sure enough, the bottle was in there. Now to the relevant part, as I was walking out, I was holding the door for my friend, but noticed he wasn't right behind me, so I looked back to see him taking the bottle away from his nose and setting it back where it was I was drinking, and probably called him out to everyone. I can't remember if I did or was just thinking, WTF my guy. Story 17. Digging in her ass. I used to work at a retail tech store. I watched a woman from my service desk walk down the aisle and put her hand down the back of her pants. She rubbed up and down many times, stopped without removing her hand, ran to the bathroom. I can only assume that she was about to crap herself or already had and just realized it. It was absolutely disgusting. I kept hand sanitizer on me for the rest of the day. Story 18. This will probably get buried, but here goes. When I was a kid, My folks stayed at a bed and breakfast place in the UK. We thought it was strange that the cereal was already distributed in bowls around the table in the communal dining area. Being somewhat mistrustful of food being left open like that, none of us ate it. Turns out our instincts were right. I had forgotten my sweater, so ran back for it just as the lady who was running the place was clearing up. I caught her pouring the uneaten cereal back into the boxes. The look of oddly defiant guilt on her face when she was caught red-handed was so groogsing 10-year-old me was just not equipped to handle. I turned around and walked back out without saying a word. I did tell my mom, though. The kicker to this? I had accidentally sneezed all over mine. Story 19. My brother, Christmas lunch. Way too absorbed in his phone, I think he forgot where he was. Picked his nose and ate it. Also my friend who pulled out a tit and began popping nipple pimples, then smelling them. Story 20. I gave a homeless guy $1 in his right hand, and he immediately jabbed his left hand out at me, and it was covered in some sort of clear slime. I recoiled instantly and excused myself from the conversation. Story 21. A couple of weeks ago, my cousin and her 3 young sons came to visit us at our cabin. We were just dishing up for supper outside when she had to assist her 3-year-old to pee on our grass that we loving tend to, and we're just playing badminton on. So she goes straight from holding the kids' pee-pee back to dishing up her supper. Unwashed hand goes straight into the bag of shredded cheese. Cheese goes into garbage can. Bonus. A few minutes later, the 6-year-old whipped it out and also peed on the grass. The 3-year-old joined in. Then a few minutes later, they were literally rolling where they just peed. Suffice to say, I cleaned for hours after they left and washed every piece of fabric in my cabin. Story 22. I have to add mine, since I don't see one like it. While driving in Piskortniks, I looked over to see the shirtless driver in the car next to me slowing, rubbing his nipples in circles with his fingertips. It's been 6 years, and I still think about it. Story 23. I watched a homeless guy make vigorous love to a trash bin. He was really going at it. Finished and walked off with his pants still down around just one leg. Story 24. In college, my then girlfriend and I took a high school-aged exchange student who was living with my girlfriend's parents at the time to a nearby big city. Everything was closed and we were starving. We settled on a Chinese restaurant that was almost entirely empty, but which sat the 3 of us right next to the table of the only other patron, a dude probably in his 40s who looked a bit intoxicated. During the interminable wait for our own food, the dude next to us is served some pink sweet and sour dish. He ate a little and then began gagging loudly. My girlfriend kept begging me to look away. I was seated facing him. He then vomited onto his plate. A creamy pink vomit. Then he began to eat it. We left at that point. The restaurant employees claimed our food was about to arrive and that we couldn't leave. I firmly told them that a man 5 feet from us just ate his own upchuck and that we were not staying there. So gross. Story 25. I think I mentioned this in some hiking forum or so groogsing, but I was out hiking and going up a hill. I rounded a bend in the trail, be confronted by a big proud ass. It was a woman dropping her drawers to piss right in the middle of the trail as I backed awkwardly down the trail out of sight. The woman's mortified teenage daughter goes, "Mom!" And her mom retorts, "What? Animals do it!" I gave her what I estimated was ample time to void a large bladder load and get zipped up and on her way before I continued up the trail. But to my surprise, she was still hosing down the trail with impressive force. I again retreated. When I ventured back out, they were making their way up the trail. I balanced around the enormous puddle and past them, moving on as fast as I could. Story 26. I used to work in government housing, Section 8, elderly and disabled, etc. Part of my job was to weed whack and mow the lawns on top of the maintenance. I was weed whacking and a big chunk of sawgroogsing flew into my mouth. I thought I had hit a frog by accident and a chunk had hit me in the mouth. I wiped it and immediately smelled crap. One of the tenants in the area I was weed whacking had schizophrenia and had been crapting on the lawn and dumping jars of piss on the balcony. I had weed whacked a piece of his crap into my mouth. Absolutely horrifying. Story 27. When I was in the infantry, we were participating in field exercises one cold winter day. While patrolling, a guy spit up a loogie onto a nearby bush. It being freezing, the loogie started solidifying. A sergeant came right up to the bush and sucked that loogie in like a spaghetti noodle. I still gag thinking about it. Story 28. This was me. I dumped out all the ash and cigarette butts I had in the ashtray of my car. I dumped it out in a parking lot and was witnessed by a father and his young child. The child asks, "What is he doing, Daddy?" "He's littering. You shouldn't do that." I felt like crap, and deservedly so. I was 17 and dumb. I quit smoking at 19. The good thing is that this still bugs me almost 20 years later. Story 29. My wife saw a guy get out of his minivan, walk around to the other side of it, and take a piss out in an open parking lot. I had her show me where he was. The frickin' stupid thing is, there's a porta potty about 40 yards away. He was too lazy, I guess, to walk that far. My wife, who was driving by at the time, saw him, swung into the parking lot and yelled at him. She ain't afraid. The guy was, though. She told him to get the hell out of there, and that she had his license hash. He left in a hurry. Some guys are such effing pigs. Story 30. I saw a friend eat someone else's vomit. I was with a group of friends for a bachelor party or sawgroogsing. We had a party bus. We're at the strip club at the end of the night, and there's a big commotion. Some dude, not in our group, spews all over the floor. Bouncers escort him out. I'm about 15 feet away, and the area has cleared because of course it has. One of the guys in our group was standing right in front of the vomit puddle, looks at it for a second, bends over and swipes his finger through it, brings it to his face, inspects his finger, smells his finger, then out the finger in his mouth. I just about lost it. I waited until we were out of the bar to ask him why he did that. He is an interesting dude and was just curious. Story 31. A lady sitting next to me on an airplane stuck her hand down the front of her pants, scratched, pulled it out and smelled it, then played with whatever she had on her fingers for a little bit before wiping it on her pants. Later on in the flight, she took some gum out of her mouth and stuck it on the back of the tray table. I glared at her and handed her a napkin, and she then unstuck it and put it in the napkin. Thankfully, it was a short flight, but I was absolutely disgusted. She had to be in her 40s BTW. Story 32. She took a tissue out through the sleeve of her shirt from under her armpit. She wiped the sweat of her head and put it back under her armpit. Coworker from a fesh section going to the toilet while keeping his disposable gloves on. And afterwards, he rinsed them under the tap. No soap, etc., just some water flowing over them, and went back to work. Seen some other fresh section coworkers and customers leave the bathroom without washing their hands as well. Wholesale retail, so most of the customers are also cooks. The worst would be the temporary refugee kid I had in class, only for a couple weeks. He would peel the bubble gum from under the desk and chew it. Story 33. Went to the bank for work. It was at Kroger, so a lot of people. This guy is at a different teller and has a large belly. He lifts it up to rest on the counter. The shirt wasn't covering it. I feel like if the shirt was on it, it would have been little better, but no. Big hairy belly being propped up on the side of the counter, where wheelchair users can place their stuff to write on, or to place purses on to dig through. We'll never get over that. Story 34. When I was 5, back in the 70s, when small children roamed free like it was no big thing, I encountered an older kid sitting by a stream with a child's toolbox at his side. I was very interested in seeing what he was so focused on and crept up as close as I dared to have a look. It was a live turtle. He was diligently working on prying its shell off. Even my young mind recognized my retreat must be silent. I went straight home to cry to my mom about it. She told me to take her there, but he was long gone. No turtle in sight. I sometimes wonder which serial killer he grew up to be. Story 35. At airport line. Fashionable lady with her daughter in front of me. The lady extended her hand in front of the little girl's face, and the little girl stuck out her tongue all the way. The lady then rubbed her hand on the little girl's tongue in a circular fashion to get saliva all over her, the mom's palm, then proceeded to wash her daughter's face with her saliva-covered hand. She wiped her daughter's face with her daughter's own saliva with her palm, and it must happen quite frequently because the little girl knew exactly what to do when she sees her mom's hand in front of her face. The lady never stopped her convo with her companion while doing this, and didn't wipe her hand afterwards. Story 36. This really happened according to my mill. The story is seared into my brain. I told her I didn't believe her, and she said, I swear. This sounds overdramatic, but I get grossed out easily by certain things. So apparently there was like an office party or sogrugzing, lots of food. Then everyone was cleaning up and someone was at the sink rinsing off all the dishes. She said she walked in and saw a woman take all of the wet leftover food caught in the drain trap and then eat it right there. Just typing this made me want to puke, and my poor mill is a germaphobe on top of that. Story 37. I was in line at Islands of Adventure for the Harry Potter ride. Very busy line. So many people, so I'm not sure what this person was thinking. Anyway, I saw this girl across the dividing rope from me, shove her entire hand into her ass, under her pants, dig in there, then pull her hand out and sniff it. What's wild to me is that there were people everywhere, but it seems no one even noticed but me. It was disgusting. Story 38. The guy at Whole Foods who tasted every soup by using the serving ladle. This was like 10 years ago. He tastes every single one. I have never gone back to self-serve anything. People are animals. Also went on a cruise and a woman was touching all the buffet food and licking her fingers the whole time, tasting things with her fingers. And her son was also doing the same thing. Story 39. Next to me on an airport train in Seoul, a man going through his phone contacts, texting. This was not on AA dating app. He already had their contact details. Literally like 30 plus Vietnamese women. The same exact message copied and pasted, then following up with the ones that replied asking them things like to be his girlfriend, sleep with him, etc. It was clear from the messages that he'd met some of them before. Maybe I should have minded my own business, but I decided to tell him he was disgusting as I got off the train. Story 40. I was working custodian at a local school and was in the lunchroom having my lunch. I was tucked away in a corner of the room. One of the maintenance guys came in to use the bathroom. As the toilet is flushing, he comes out doing up his belt. It's clear he didn't wash his hands. He proceeds to take a clean glass from the kitchen cupboard, gets a drink of water from the tap, and then puts the used glass back in the cupboard without washing it. He never noticed I was there, but after that I always washed any cups, etc. before I used them. Story 41. In middle school math class, someone started to complain, which disrupted the class and halted the teacher's lecture. One of the classmates was complaining how Parker, the girl sitting next to him, spat on her desk and grossed him out. Our teacher asked her to clean it off. Then she proceeded to say that's not necessary and slurp back up the spit like it's the most normal thing to do on a Monday, in front of the whole class. We were all grossed out, and I'd never forget my math teacher reactions. Ha ha ha. One of the few memories I have from middle school. Story 42. I once saw a guy on the subway pick his nose aggressively for a solid minute and then, without skipping a beat, proceed to wipe it on the handrail next to him. As if that wasn't bad enough, he then looked around, thinking no one was watching, and casually licked his fingers clean afterward. It was like he had no idea he was on a crowded train with a dozen people sitting nearby. I was too shocked to even react. I just made a mental note to never touch public handrails again. Story 43. A coworker and I had just gotten out of a truck, and I pointed out a guy I had noticed the day before. Hey, see that guy in the gold-colored car yesterday when he was stopped at the light? He was picking his nose. Coworker said, I'm calling BS on that. Right after he said that, gold car guy stopped at the light that recently turned red, stuck his finger up his nose, and started digging around. I laughed and said, I told you. Then he pulled out a long, dangling boogie and ate it. Story 44. Guy at our work was always a slob and just gross. But one day we had cleaned the toilets with blue rags, like crap-stained, piss everywhere toilets. And this guy comes out of the bathroom and goes, someone left this rag in there, I'm taking it, and proceeds to blow his nose into it, and then wipe his face up and down with it. He kept the rag for about a week before losing it, but every day 10-20x a day, blowing his nose into it or wiping his face with it. Story 45. Was at Brahms once getting food with my mom. We were waiting at the food pickup counter when one of the workers was filling someone else's drink. The women put the lid on, and I guess had overfilled the cup because some of the soda came out the top. She looks at it and just puts her mouth on top of the lid to suck off the excess. My mom and I just couldn't believe what we witnessed. Didn't turn her back or anything to try to hide it. We never went back there. Story 46. A guy I used to work with on the checkouts at a UK supermarket I saw fiddle with saugrugzing inside his mouth, which was bleeding. A tooth? An abscess? Infection? Not sure of the cause, but he had blood on his fingers, and this was in between customers. He started scanning the next customer's groceries, without so much as wiping off his fingers, and proceeded to keep touching the bloody area between scanning items. I'm sure the customers did see, but they didn't say anything to him, and the guy was completely oblivious. Story 47. Got hired as an assistant manager at a Dollar General. My first day running the store by myself, a man comes in, leaving brown drips all over the store behind him. Finally, he approaches me and asks for help finding jeans, baby wipes, Depends, and anti-diarrheal medicine. Yep, he was dripping liquid crap all over the store. Had to close for an hour to sanitize everything. Ducking vile. Story 48. The kitchen I worked in was long and narrow. If you were standing in my bakery area, you could see the line cooks working the main line. I saw our female cook checking left and right, missing me 50 feet away in my area, to be sure she was alone. Then stick her hand under her apron, down the front of her pants, and do a deep, hard scratch. She must have just shaved or so grugzing. Went right back to cooking after. I was so grossed out. Never ate anything she cooked again. Story 49. At a hotel continental breakfast last summer, I was already sitting with my family while another lady was sitting at their table eating a pastry. Her kid went to the juice dispenser but couldn't get the juice to come out. This lady stood up, licked all her fingers, and then used the same fingers to go press the juice buttons for her daughter. Then sat back down as dozens of other people came through, getting their breakfast and juice, not realizing how much nastier that dispenser now was. Story 50. Some creep on the bus got up from his seat to purposely sit where two young ladies had been sitting. Kind of plastic-eye faux leather seats. Anyway, his enthusiasm to leap there straight away, given he wasn't sharing his seat already, was a bit off to begin with. But then he wiped the palms of his hands over the seats and started sniffing them, the ducking creep. Story 52. The way people treat customer service workers is sometimes pretty disgusting. That people think it's okay to bully essential workers is gross. Or that table of people that just came from church that are trying their best to make the server cry and then not leave a tip. Or worse, a Jesus pamphlet. People just flat out lying to a manager about an interaction to get free stuff. Story 53. I work in a grocery store. Every once in a while, I see someone bring groceries into the bathroom. More often, it's an empty handbasket that they place on the floor and continue shopping with. More than either of those, men who will leave the bathroom without washing their hands, then continue about their day shopping or picking saugrugzing up from the deli. The produce section is right outside the bathroom. Wash your produce for God's sake. Story 54. It was my uncle's wedding day, and his wife was just getting ready to walk down the aisle. One of the guests in the wife's family decided to stand up and show off his Johnson. There were kids there, and he got kicked out trying to play it off as a joke. Story 55. I once saw someone pick their nose and then wipe it on the underside of a table when they thought no one was looking. It was pretty gross, and it made me a lot more cautious about touching public surfaces after that. Story 56. Saw a lady change her kid's diaper on a dining table. The one time I went to Olive Garden with a friend. I flagged down the lady bussing tables and warned her about it. Lady left the dirty diaper on the table and gave her my extra $5 since nobody should be dealing with that kind of crap. Story 57. Was at the airport young girl around 10 years old with her mom sitting by me and wife. Her mom gets up to go to the toilet. The girl's got the sniffles, and all of a sudden she sneezes. A load of snot comes out her nose, which she cradles in her hand and quick as it drinks it all back in. Never seen anything like it. I'm heaving just thinking about it. Story 58. Licking their hands and fingers, then wiping their hands on their jeans. This was back in middle school. There was a girl licking the palms of her hands, then fingers one by one. Then she'd rub both hands on her jeans. I asked her what she was doing. She said, "I'm cleaning my hands." Story 59. Was at a resort just Mexico and went in to have some lunch. Watched a guy take a scoop of guacamole and then lick the spoon and put it back into the serving tray. Story 60. When I was in 10th grade, my biology class had to dissect fetal pigs. At one point, you were supposed to crack the skull open, literally. Nobody in my group would do it. So our biology teacher came over and dug her fingers into this little piggy's skull and opened it to expose the brain. She was not wearing gloves. 5 minutes later, I look up and she was biting her nails. Story 61. We arrived, me and my dad, at a gas station, and car next to us, the woman has her whole forearm deep in her. Little to say, we burst out laughing, and for a solid 5-10 minutes, we can't stop, and even in the gas station after, we're still laughing. Story 62. I've seen old men getting off into urinals twice in my life, and I didn't even have to pay for it. I know many will say they were just shaking it off, and I do understand the skepticism, but in both cases, the shake-off ended with a change of facial expression and a buckling of the knees. Story 63. Went for brunch with an old friend, and he spilled some crumbs on the table, and he licked his finger and picked them up and ate them. It wouldn't have been as bad if he hadn't gotten a sandwich and they weren't pastry crumbs, they weren't his crumbs. Also witnessed this same person pick and eat a scab. Story 64. I was at an outdoor mall, sitting on a bench, waiting for someone to come out of a store. This Indian guy sits next to me, and he's wearing sandals. Out of nowhere, he just starts picking in between his toes with his fingers. As reading all of the comments has shown me that scratching your ass and smelling it is way more common than it should be. Story 65. Watched a homeless woman in the communal showers in 2015 take a half-done shot from a dead-odded woman on the floor, complete with her blood and syringe still, and shoot up, then immediately fall out and crack her head open. I was naked and wet in the stall and came out to alert staff. Story 66. I watched a grown man pick his nose when I was people watching at a casino. I watched as he then brought the booger he found to his mouth and ate it. He kept his finger there like he was biting his nail. The horror showed on my face as he looked over and saw me see him do it. It's burned into my memory. Story 67. Driving in the passenger seat has taught me that there are some people out there that just love organic snacks straight from their nose. It's so ducking foul, and it affects all age groups. Story 68. Years ago, outside a cinema in Stoke, queuing to go in, saw a dad tap the ash of the end of his cigarette on his kid's head. Quite deliberately, and he saw me watching him. I was about as old as his son. He then gave me, "This is our little secret," kind of a big grin. Story 69. I had a cheerleader who sat in the back of my classroom a few years ago who routinely went knuckle-deep picking her nose. Also, the sister of my college roommate would eat at our table. She'd bend a tine on a fork and pick her teeth with it right there in the cafeteria. Story 70. I was in Target when I saw a young woman walking in front of me with her hand deep in between her ass cheeks, take out her hand and run across all the clothes on racks down the aisle. This confirmed one thing for me: never wear clothes off the rack from the store without washing them first. Story 71. I watched a woman in full business attire stop in the downtown of a major city, pick a piece of gum off the sidewalk, put it in her mouth, and carry on her merry way. Story 72. My boss picks at his face acne and then licks his hand and goes at it again. He also clips his fingernails at his desk. I gag so hard when I look at him. Makes for a fun day when I'm in the office. Story 73. This was in Fresno, California, so it shouldn't surprise anybody. But once I was stopped at an intersection and saw a homeless lady reach back into her ass and pull out a cigarette. She proceeded to light said cigarette and put it in her mouth. Still, grosses me out to this day. Story 74. Old senile lady who lives on my street regularly goes for walks around the neighborhood and inevitably past my apartment. Every day, she'll rip a few branches from our hedges to wave around while she's walking. Once in a while, she'll drop her pants, take a crap on the sidewalk, and just keep going. Story 75. Was in class and the guy sat right next to me fully having a. I said, "For you doing?" And he instantly pulled his hands out his pants and didn't speak for like a month. Story 76. Used to work at a grocery store while going to college. Saw a coworker of mine who worked in the deli section that would cut meat, not wash her hands after going to the bathroom. She just walked right out after flushing the toilet. Wished I could have said so grugzing to get her fired. Story 77. I worked at a mall years ago and a guy crouched in front of our store window and pooped on the floor. He told security he needed to go, nonchalantly. I felt so bad for the old lady custodian who had to clean it up. So gross. Story 78. Was driving home. This is in the UK, Blackpool, and saw a guy walking down the street. He was about 30, pretty nondescript. Without missing a beat or breaking stride, he leaned to one side and projectile vomited everywhere. Didn't stop for breath and kept walking. Story 79. I saw an 11-year-old kid on the streets of Nicaragua smash. Stray dogs, head with a cinder block. If I wasn't out of my element and in an unknown barrio, I would probably have put that boy through a wall. Story 80. Someone scratching inside their ass and around their balls, sniffing, then going back to playing the game we were playing while holding my controller. I can never use that controller again. They also bit their nails afterwards without washing. Ugh. Story 81. I watched one of my managers eat a booger on a Teams call because he didn't know his camera was on. He's in his late 50s, early 60s. Plopped it in his mouth, big as day. No one ever said a word. Story 82. There was this girl who sat beside me in library. Used to scratch head and eat dandruff. I regret watching that. Changed library as soon as month was over. Pure horror. GTG vomit. Story 83. Supermarket. She sneezed in her hand. Grabbed a pack of cheese with that hand. Studied it and put it back in the shelf. It felt like I witnessed pestilence in Supernatural. Story 84. I was in elementary school. I saw a classmate spitting into a milk container. Then he gave the container to a teacher who had reprimanded him. That student later became a pastor. Story 85. I saw a homeless dude picking scabs of his obviously gangrenous leg. It smelled so bad I nearly threw up. Didn't sit on public benches for a very long time after that. Story 86. Fingering her ass shy, I saw a girl in middle of the beach fingering her ass, scratching it, and then she even smelled it. I immediately felt like puking. Story 87. Saw a guy with a glass eye pop it out, put it in his mouth to clean it, then put it back in. I gagged.